September.
September. That's like perfect time of year too. Did you have good weather while you were there?
Yeah, it was spectacular. But I did have an indoor, during the workshops, indoor workspace.
Next week, did you like? All right, so it's a beautiful day here in San Francisco. I'm here with Tim. I'm thinking of making something of this scene here. This is a scene I have painted before, but there are a few things I want to do differently this time. I'll be painting on a 24 by 24 inch stretched canvas, and I'll be using a limited palette today of phthalo blue, ultramarine blue, alizarin crimson, burnt sienna. This is sort of a cadmium red light color, but it's actually permanent red medium from Rembrandt. And I've got titanium white and cadmium yellow medium. All right, let's check in with Tim here. So you're thinking of making something of this scene right here.
Yeah, I got this building and the palm tree, and then there's a huge tree mass. So there's a lot of darks. It feels like a lot to take on because I'm trying to include some of the street view over on the right. But I was drawn to the light on the building and the shadow shapes and that light triangle over there. And then I like the blue shadows on the sidewalk. So it's an unusual viewpoint. It's definitely going to be a challenge.
I love your sketches. I'm jealous. I wish I had the discipline to do sketches. So there's the idea right there.
Yeah, so I walked around with my viewfinder and picked this scene. So there's my anchors, that building with that palm tree and that big dark shadow mass. I'm not really sure how this is going to work out. That's going to be the hardest stuff, all those buildings that are light and shadow and they're distant. So I'm not sure how that's going to work, but yeah, I'll give it a try.
I've thinned some burnt sienna here for sketching, mapping out the big shapes as usual. And that's the composition right there. The biggest challenges when painting cityscapes is just managing all the information, especially if you're doing a scene like this where there's just a lot of buildings and a lot of cars. And so what I try to do is just simplify by breaking down the scene into light and dark. And I'm trying not to think about specific things. Like, in fact, like the cars, I just view them as a dark shape. So that would be like the cars right there, and just add a few highlights. And hopefully it will read as cars. I debated whether to include this wall or not. On the previous painting I did include it and it worked out, so I am going to include it. You're making some quick progress here. I already like the look of that.
Yeah, I just find that when I move faster and it feels a little more uncontrolled, that's when I often get things that I like, that if I were being more careful, I would not get.
Got a mixture here of ultramarine blue, alizarin crimson, and I've thinned it quite a bit with odorless mineral spirits, and I've got a natural bristle flat, number 8. I want to quickly map out the shadow shapes. So everything that is in shadow will be this color. I'm just going for an interesting value pattern here because the light is changing, so I want to capture the light-dark pattern before it changes too much. I'm not thinking about the individual bits within these shadow shapes. In other words, there's trees right here, different buildings. I'm just ignoring all of that, keeping the mix thin. I am squinting at the scene to throw my eyes slightly out of focus. So that I just focus on the shapes. There's actually quite a bit of light over on the edge here. There's some plants that are lit up, but I'm going to darken it. I don't want there to be bright distracting shapes at the edge of the canvas. So there's the light dark pattern. I do need to break up this building right here. There's some fire escapes. So I will create a vanishing point. I'll usually find the vanishing point by lining my brush up with the roof of the buildings. It appears the vanishing point is at the top of the street, which is pretty common. So the tops of the windows will point to the vanishing point. And the windows are just going to be suggested, so I'm not worried about getting any detail into the windows. All right, so at this point I've got the light dark pattern mapped out, so I step back about 10 or 15 feet just to take a look at the design, and I feel like I like the shapes. So next I'll block in the light colors, and then I'll start looking for variations within the dark shapes. How's it going?
It's coming along. The composition feels a little weird, kind of imbalanced. Like there's just way too much weight over here, and this just feels like it's tipping up right now. So I'm gonna try to push that. I think it's the grays in here are too dark, and they're connecting with that. So I need to adjust that. But I'm happy with the horizon line and the palm tree and houses coming together okay. But still a lot of work to do.
All right, for the sky, I've got a mixture of titanium white, ultramarine blue, and a bit of phthalo blue. And I have thinned a bit with liquid and odorless mineral spirits. There will be variations in the color and value of the sky, but for now I'm just going with an average, and then I'll make refinements. Still using my number 8 natural bristle flat, and I can see that this mixture is a bit dark, but that's all right. It's kind of tricky with the sky because if you make it too light, it's hard to get any saturation, and yet the sky is usually one of the lightest values in the painting. Okay, there's the sky. For the street, I'm starting with a warm grayish mixture. My palette is in full sun, so I'm exaggerating the warmth because I know once I get this painting indoors, it will not appear as warm. It'll appear cooler, less saturated. And actually, I think the value is a bit dark. That's all right, I will be lightening it up. I do want the street color to be dark enough that I can put some street markings in. I find that the little details like street markings and reflections on cars, those are the details that define the scene. And so if the street is too light in value, the street markings will not show up. The street up here is obscured by trees, but I'm going to use artistic license here because I want to have some cars with some bright reflections at the top of the street here to sort of draw the eye into the distance. I've added a bit more titanium white to my street mixture here. I kind of want to keep some of these random dark shapes in here. Okay, I've got a green here mixed using phthalo blue, cadmium yellow medium, and a bit of titanium white. Just suggesting some of the light bits of the trees. And there's some trees up here as well. All right, so at this point, the block-in is complete. The next step will be to add some definition to the dark shapes without breaking up the design. I'm going to start with my darkest darks first, so adding the dark portion of the trees. Got some dark areas over here. And I will try to leave some of the transparent areas of the original sketch. Got a mixture here of permanent red, medium, and some burnt sienna. Thinking about getting some red into the painting. There's some bougainvillea over here and a plum tree over here. I'm not concerned with getting the colors exact. Using my limited palette, I will not be able to mix this color right here, but if I did mix that color accurately, it would just stand out in the painting. By using my limited palette, I will keep continuity and unity in the overall design, hopefully. I'm working on the cars that are in the foreground, and I'm still just looking at the cars as one big shape. I will break it up with details that define. For the variations in the shadows, I'm just working into the grays that are on my palette. I'm just approximating colors. I'm trying not to make the mixes too dark because I want visible colors in my shadows, keeping the values around a mid-tone. Last time I painted this scene, I remember making this building right here too light in value, and it did break up the composition. So I'm going a little darker this time. So it looks like you scraped down the tree.
I did. I scraped down the tree. I haven't decided what I'm going to do, but I'm just trying it again. Pumped up the lights here, reestablished these shadows under the trees, simplified some of this stuff. I'm struggling with how to pull this house out of the background, so I had the brilliant idea of putting that yellow house in over there.
Oh yeah.
But it didn't work, so took it out. So I'm trying to figure out another plan of how to make that house strong, because this color is connecting with that, and so I either got to push it into this kind of that color zone or make some other actually distinguishable structure back there.
Adding the shadows on the street. Now that I've got some color on the canvas, it's interesting how light in value my initial scrub in was. And this is my dark bit of wall here, but it's pretty light in value. These cars up here are primarily dark in value. And then there's a few more cars over here. There's quite a bit of reflected light on this wall in the foreground. And I'm seeing sort of a greenish color, so I'm going with that for now. And I'll add bits of reflected light at the end if I feel it needs it. There's also light on the top of the wall. I can add that as well. One thing I'm keeping in mind while applying the paint is that if you apply the paint with intention and confidence, then if people can't figure out what they're looking at, then that's on them.
Pretty happy with how that resolved. You know, it's not anything specifically rendered, but it doesn't bother me now, and that's the goal, just to get it to where it doesn't bother me.
Adding the detail definitely brings it to life, you know. Yeah. Little highlights like the
stop sign was the first thing I put in. Well, the stop lettering on the street, and then the stop sign, and then I just put some flowers in, and then what really made it for me was the red curb. I didn't really have much color in here, much warm stuff, so putting that in I feel like really helped a lot. And I like the palm tree, how dark it is. You don't really see any color in that, but the silhouette against the distant blues I think works pretty well.
Oh yeah, definitely. All right, so here's what I finished up with. This painting took just under 3 hours to complete. It was finished on site. I'm considering some touch-ups, minor touch-ups, to the buildings on the left here and possibly on the right as well. I'm thinking of adding a bit more detail to the windows, but I'm not sure. I'm gonna live with the painting for a while and see how I feel about it. I do like the design. I like the light dark pattern, and I do feel that there's a convincing feeling of light in the painting. I like the level of detail on the street and the cars. I feel like this painting is a good opportunity to show how I approach painting complicated subjects like a row of cars. And to recap that, I just look at the overall shape of the grouping of the cars, and then I look for the details that define. And so I'm not going to paint every detail. I'm just going to look for some of the darkest darks and the lightest lights, and then maybe add a few tail lights, that sort of thing. and then let the viewer's imagination fill in the blanks. When you are painting in plein air, time is of the essence, and we don't have time to paint every single detail, especially when you're painting something like a cityscape. So it's good to be able to determine what are the details that define the object. The cars is a perfect example. It's the darkest darks and then the highlights. In the case of buildings, the details that define are the silhouette or the outline, and then usually it's the windows. Maybe there's a dark line under an eave, that sort of thing. One other thing that I'll mention is that I wanted to draw the eye up towards the top of the hill here, so I made the highlights on the cars up here brighter than the ones down here because I did not want to draw the eye to this corner. Alright, so I hope you guys enjoyed this video. Let me know what you think in the comments. If you'd like to see some extra videos and help support the channel, there's a Patreon link down below. It's the Patreon support that helps keep me making these videos, and it's much appreciated. I've also got a PayPal tip jar down below, and I'll put a link to Tim's Instagram down below, so check it out. Other than that, stay creative. I'll see you guys in the next video.